Good evening. Thank you for joining me for my final exam presentation. My name is Erin Hinton. I am with Chattahoochee Technical College. My course is ECCE 1112-40327. This is for the spring 2025 semester, and it's with Dr. Marilyn Thomas. This first slide will discuss gross motor skills. And I gave a description there on the screen. Large muscle movements that involve the entire body. Examples are jumping, running, or balancing as seen below. I picked the picture of the two children out in the outdoors. I put my notations on there. You can see the child on the log is reaching out to her friend for some stability. This is involving using all of her major muscles in her core to provide that balance. The strand that this comes from is the Motor Skills Standard, PDM-5. The child will demonstrate gross motor skills. And following there, you can see coordinating movements to perform a task and demonstrates coordination and balance. My assessment tool of choice for this is observation, and by being in close proximity to the children outside, which is a best practice for safety, I would notate the child's movements in the notebook, just about what I'm seeing, making sure to date and time stamp in my notes along with any other children that are present. Two learning center materials that I would use to support gross motor skill development. In the outdoors, I have a sensory bin walking path, and I also included some practice with crossing your midline, where the child sits on the ground with some chalk and practices going across their body. Moving on to fine motor skills. That is the precise movements using the small muscles in the hands, wrists, and fingers. I've made a few notations on the screen about the child using the pincer grasp and how they've rolled the Play-Doh into little circles that are very similar in size, and then how they have rolled the Play-Doh into long strips and put that into the Roy G. Biv order. This strand falls under the motor skill standard of PDM-6, which is the child will demonstrate fine motor skills. There are two listed below. Refines grasp to manipulate tools and objects, uses hand-eye coordination to manipulate smaller objects with increasing control. My assessment tool of choice for this was a portfolio, and I would take a photo or a video of the child rolling out the clay, try to capture a three-step progression of that activity. So I would do a starting photo, midway, and then a final product photo. And then those would be placed into either an electronic portfolio or hard copy portfolio, just depending on my school's choice of documentation. Two learning center materials to support fine motor skill development. I put on there, I love roll the dice activities, so I put one in for the Play-Doh area. They would roll the dice and then choose the corresponding number with the color for the rainbow. And second, I have an area where the child would sort the mixed items with their matching color onto the color pads of Play-Doh, and you just want to make sure that the pieces are large enough for this age group so we don't have any choking hazards. But that's a good correlation between grasping, pushing, pulling. Moving on to cognitive development. This is the process of growth and change in intellectual abilities, including thinking, reasoning, and understanding. Making some notations on here, I pointed out that I noticed that the child is smiling, carefully looking at their hands and the work that they're putting together. I liked that there was an abundance of loose parts for them to choose from, and I noticed that somebody has put some wheels onto a box, perhaps turning it into a vehicle of some sort. This strand falls under Geometry and Spatial Thinking, Standard CD-MA5. The child will explore, recognize, and describe spatial relationships between objects. CD-MA5.3a follows simple directions, which demonstrates an understanding of directionality, order, and position of objects. Also, CD-MA5.3b begins using more deliberate manipulation to fit objects together. And the assessment tool of choice would be a running record. I would just make it a point to observe when the child's at this particular center over the course of the school year, just making any notations about the building scenarios and note any details about progress or differences from previous sessions that I have observed. And then those would be stored on a running record. It just shows a timeline of progress for that certain activity. 2 Learning Center materials to support cognitive development. I think it's important to have books in each of the centers around the classroom. So for this, I would pick ones that focus on building, architecture, and that can help fuel some creative building activities. I also placed in here some task cards that are specific to building. Using task cards is a great way to strengthen their cognitive processing while they're at play. Next up, we have language and literacy development. This is the fundamental cognitive processes that involve learning to communicate, read, and write. Some notations on there. I noted that the child is working with an alphabet box activity. They've got objects in both of their hands, and this is a solo work center. There's no other children present. It looks like that they've matched several language items to the corresponding cards with the alphabet letters on them. This strand falls under early reading, the standard CLL6. The child will develop early phonological awareness, which is the awareness of the units of sound, and the second standard would be CLL7. The child will demonstrate increasing knowledge of the alphabet. CLL6.3e segments words into symbols with adult guidance, and CLL7.3a with prompting and support can identify some alphabet letter names. My assessment tool of choice here is a checklist. I would observe and utilize a checklist while the student is active in the center. I would put a check mark next to any alphabet letter or letter sound that the child shows recognition for. 2 Learning Center materials to support communication, language, and literacy. I have included the rainbow salt writing, which could be started out with the child drawing shapes, then symbols or letters, and finally words. They can use their finger and then graduate to a paintbrush once their pincher grasp has been achieved. Great practice for those fine motor skills. And then I have on here a mystery bag. I think this is a great way to encourage creative language ideas. Child picks a few random items out of the bag, and then they have to make up a story or a song using what they've chosen. Next, we have social emotional development. This encompasses a child's ability to understand, express, and manage emotions, as well as build and maintain positive relationships with others. Some notations. I noticed that there's multiple children participating in the puppet show. This shows collaboration. I noticed that the children are all focused on the puppets in front of them. Shows that they are engaged. Puppet shows are a wonderful activity involving teamwork and is a fun way for them to explore feelings and emotions through characters. This strand falls under developing a sense of self with others. The standard is SED5. The child will develop relationships and social skills with peers. SED5.3a initiates play with 1 or 2 other children, and also SED5.3b engages in mutual cooperative play. Assessment tool of choice here is interviews. I would spend time asking questions about the puppet show. How did they decide what story they wanted to tell? Do their puppets have names? What is their favorite part of putting on a puppet show? How did the character feel when, and then you would talk about a particular part in the story. And what lesson did the puppets want us to learn? Often, just interviewing and talking with children can glean the most insight. 2 Learning Center materials to support social and emotional development. Here I've added a felt board story based on the book How Kind by Mary Murphy. I love this book, and accompanying it is some felt pieces, and it tells the story of how all of the animals come together to be kind to each other. And the next one is the Feelings Adventure Board book. This is from a company called Slumberkins, and they deal mainly with social and emotional support. This board game is for children 3 years and above. It's a cooperative game, not competitive, and all the characters have lost their feelings, and they have to help each other find their feelings and get them back to the tree. So it's just a really great way to explore the entire gamut of little emotions, and big ones too. And our last area is self-help development. This is the process of empowering children to become more independent and self-sufficient by developing skills related to personal care, hygiene, and daily tasks. I chose a photo of the toddler coat hack. This is one of the first self-help techniques that most of my toddlers start learning when they're in my classroom, and watching them be able to put their coat on by themselves and not have an adult have to help them each time, it gives them the greatest sense of accomplishment. Some notes on here, I just quickly put that there's 2 children learning how to put their coat on, and the child on the right has begun to stick both her hands into the coat's sleeve holes. The other child is watching and getting ready to do it as well. I did notice that they have given each other a good amount of personal space in order to complete those maneuvers. This strand is developing a sense of self. Standard is SED1. The child will develop self-awareness. SED1.3c shows sense of satisfaction in his or her own abilities, preferences, and accomplishments. SED1.3d shows emerging sense of independence in his or her own choices. Assessment tool of choice here is an anecdotal record. I would observe the child attempting to put their own coat on, unassisted for example. Then I would just jot down a quick note as to what I saw. Were there any particular steps that caused some confusion? Was the child watching someone else put their coat on at the same time, or were they doing these steps by memory? 2 Learning Center materials to support self-help development. The first one is the Dress Your Bear activity. It's a great practice in pulling on clothing. It gets those pinch and pull muscles warmed up, and children love to bring their stuffies to school for the day. The next one, kids always have a blast with. This is a laminated dental activity. They are going to brush the teeth on the page that have been made dirty by a dry erase marker. And as the child rubs the toothbrush across the dry erase marker, it makes it go away and the teeth become pearly white again. And in conclusion, I have my reference sheet as shown in the slide. And thank you so much for your time and attention.